Ba-da-da-dum, 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 ba-da-da-dum. They're sleepy and they're kooky, mysterious and ooky. They're all together hooky, the Hillside family. The church is just a building, but people come to praise sing. It really is a cool thing, the Hillside family. Ba-da-da-dum. Greet, ba-da-da-dum, seat, ba-da-da-dum, 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 repeat. So get your act together, no matter what the weather, you'll be light as a feather, the Hillside family. Ba-da-da-dum, sinners, ba-da-da-dum, saints, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum. The Hillside family. Well, if you put up with all that, then you think it's actually humorous or fun, then you might be one of the Hillside family. Anyways, welcome everybody on this day that we are, it's kind of a strange day. It's both the Sabbath and it's both the holiday, Halloween day. So we thought we'd have a little fun with that and actually speak a little bit about some of that. So if you're halfway across the world listening, halfway across the country listening, welcome. If you're part of the Hillside family and just catching up from the weekend, thank you for checking us out again and remembering to check out the sermon you missed. And again, if you're listening for the first time, maybe looking for a church, this is us. We'd love to see you sometime in person if you are able to check us out. Well, anyway, so welcome to Hillside's Scary Sunday Sermon. Now, this sermon really isn't about Halloween, but it's kind of dealing with several biblical themes that overlap with this holiday. I have 5 points I want to make. Give me extra attention to the 5th point. So the first 4 points, we're going to move kind of fast. Let me start out by saying that each of us have different things that scare us, right? I find it interesting that some people, like myself, fear things that they can control. What I mean by that is, I guess I'm afraid that I'm going to make a bad choice, right? So I fear things that if I choose wrongly, it's going to go bad. It's going to go bad against me. Now, other people I know tend to fear things they can't control. Things like, natural disasters, getting sick, getting hit by a car, some strange thing happening out of nowhere. We're just different. We fear different things. Now, on a smaller scale, I don't really fear the dark anymore, though I did somewhat as a kid. I don't really fear small spiders, but if you make it big enough, yeah, I do. But one thing that I've never been able to handle very well is scary movies. Yeah, it just brings out my natural anxiety that I have. I've always, when a kid, had trouble sleeping if I would watch one, and to this day, I don't watch them anymore, but I kind of wonder if maybe I still wouldn't sleep very well. Now, I watched several movies growing up, we kind of just didn't limit ourselves too much to that era. And I saw Jaws and Alien as far as suspenseful monster movies. But I also saw some other more serious horror movies, like at least parts of it, Poltergeist and The Shining was pretty scary. And if you've ever watched the classic films, and I don't think I've ever watched these start to finish, but I've seen parts of course, The Exorcist and The Omen. Now, these are movies that have a religious overtone to them, not necessarily in a good way, but they do. And there's elements in these movies, elements in the religious part of it that I want to focus on today. I want to find, in a sense, the truth in the haystack. There's a haystack full of lies and evil things in these movies, but there's also a needle of truth. So the first thing I want to mention is the fact that these films actually give us a clearer understanding of the importance of morality, right? Because when we see evil, we recognize it, right? And we point it out. In this world where there doesn't seem like there's much right or wrongs anymore, when we see a movie like this, we understand, wait a minute, that is bad, that is evil. And seeing the battle of evil and good indicates we still believe in some truth in this world. And while horror films might be guilty at times of glorifying evil, they still remind us that we hold to some absolutes in this world. It's funny, you didn't know when you were watching these movies you were forming these worldviews, did you? Well, maybe you are, right? Isaiah 5:20 says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." Okay, so the second point that I want to make from these movies is they teach us that often when we put our trust in human beings rather than God, it leads to a disaster, right? I mean, there's always a mad scientist or an unstable maniac, got released from prison, or some angry villain, up to no good. They're out to cause trouble. And it reminds us that human beings, and there are some strange ones out there, that's not who we're supposed to follow. Psalms 118:8 says it's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans. And kind of related to that, Mark, is that it's not just that there are humans we shouldn't trust, but in a sense there's an evil in our own hearts that we have to acknowledge, that our selfish nature is still there. I think everybody relates to some level to a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of thing, right? Or a man turning into a werewolf on a full moon. Because we know we have that bad side that can come out. We need help, right? We're both the victim and the villain, needing someone to save us. And of course, we have a hero. We have a Savior in the form of Jesus Christ. So Ephesians 2:1-3, I think, addresses this to some degree. It says, "As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins," that evil it is, right? "In which you used to live when you followed the ways of the world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. All of us lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath." Okay, so the fourth point is that these films often remind us that our battle is not with flesh and blood, but with evil powers. Because often they portray demonic and satanic stuff in a lot of these films. And while they portray a lot of information about warfare and that's incorrect, they tend to make Christ followers the victims and somewhat clueless, powerless, there is still a level of truth here. Again, Ephesians 6:12, a lot of us know this one. "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Okay, so here's just a quick review, because I know that I went fast through those, and if you're a note taker, you probably missed them. So number one was, it actually gives us some understanding that there's a morality, that there's some truth, there's some absolutes out there. Number two, we're to trust in God, not human beings. Number three, there's an evil that lurks in all of us that we have to be mindful of. And fourth, our ultimate battle is not with flesh and blood. So, with that said, I want to talk about the fifth point. And this one I want to spend a little more time with. And it's the subject of death, right? And while this subject may be difficult for a lot of us, and especially if you've just lost a loved one, you're going through something, it's important to understand some things about death. In these movies, of course, people are killed all the time. It's barbaric sometimes. It's just crazy. In fact, most of the movie, you see one by one people getting killed off until it gets down to the last person. John Donne once said, "Each man's death diminishes me, for I'm involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to know whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." The book of Psalms says it a different way. Psalms 90:12 says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." See, I know a lot of people out there who overreact to the idea of death. It's a fear they have. And that's not good. God doesn't want that. But we should have a healthy respect for that, for the truth of death. Saint Benedict would actually encourage us to remind ourselves regularly that we are not promised tomorrow. And he calls this the practice of memento mori, if I pronounced that right. And it's to have the expectation of death daily before our eyes. I bet most of us don't know that ancient Christians would actually keep a practice of putting something like a skull on their desk to remind them of their mortality. It wasn't that they were evil. It wasn't that they were worshiping Satan. They just wanted a reminder that today is all that you have, this moment even. Pope Alexander VII actually had a coffin made, and he placed it in his bedroom to remind him of the brevity of life. Seems strange and outlandish to us, but can you see the point? In the medieval period, churches would even have paintings where people would be dancing with skeletons on the church walls. And it was the same point. Now, this particular painting was referred to as the Danse Macabre, or the Dance of Death. See, in our culture today, that would seem either evil or inappropriate. And I get that. And I think as a society, we don't know what it's like to mourn and to understand death. In fact, we overlook it. We move on in our life. We're kind of told to get over it quickly, right? Even in the midst of this COVID, you would think that's one thing that we should start to appreciate by this COVID taking so many lives in our nation and our world. Living is a risky business. To some degree, it always has been. In fact, certain eras of our time, much more so than today. The moment we are born, we begin to die, so to speak. Okay, let me switch gears just a little bit. There are two types of people when it comes to the big picture of things. I am not a big picture person. You know the expression, I can't see the forest of the trees? That's kind of how my brain operates. It's not that it's wrong. In fact, it's just as good as having the big picture. It's more of a personality thing. I mean, there are people who see the big picture and don't see what's right in front of them, huh? They're going to walk right into a tree when they're looking at the forest, right? So it's not like one's good and one's bad. But in this particular case, if you're a big picture person, you actually might have an appreciation or understand what I'm trying to say a little bit quicker, a little easier than those of us who live amongst the trees, going from one problem, one hurdle. Maybe we need to do something to step outside of ourselves, to see the big picture. Maybe we need to go walking in a cemetery. Maybe we need a skull on our desk. Now, I'm not sure I would recommend putting a coffin in your bedroom, but hey, that's just me. Besides, some people out there driving Ford F-150 black trucks. Now, there's a coffin on wheels right there for you, right? So, what do? I mean, I try to watch movies sometimes, not a horror movie per se, but a movie that reminds me that life is short, that we don't know when our day will come. So appreciate the moment, right? Seize the day, right? So life is this great gift once again, and I don't want to waste it, because so often I just start to get bogged down in life, and I start just seeing all these trees, and I forget to see the big picture. And we get so upset and angry over things that if we knew that we would die tomorrow, they wouldn't hardly mean a thing to us. So yeah, maybe we need a little more memento mori in our lives. The idea of death should not haunt you. You should not cripple in fear. But it should be enough in our brains that it gives us a perspective, an appreciation for the day, for the moment. But I struggle because, again, I'm down here in the trees. And sometimes I feel even the branches are sticking inside of me. Sometimes they're self-inflicted, sometimes other people stick the branch in. And at that point, I think I'll never be able to rise above it. I'll never be able to rise and look at the big picture. But that's exactly what I need to do. And it's exactly what's going to take those branches out of my side and put them away so they're not painful anymore, is to get the big picture and to rise above and to see the forest. God's bigger picture. It's hard in this day and age. We are, it seems like, as self-centered as we ever have been. We are consumer-driven. We have this difficult time seeing beyond our own needs and our own wounds. And we need this sense of like, life is fragile. You're not promised tomorrow. In fact, my friends, if you haven't heard this, you need to be reminded, you're going to die. At least your current body will, right? And you don't know when. You don't know when. But you will leave whatever you have left to someone else who will decide if your stuff that you left behind is worth keeping or selling or throwing away. Life will go on without you. And we must not become so arrogant and self-obsessed that we don't appreciate how frail we ultimately are. So yeah, this is a weird day. It's a weird holiday for the church. But we can appreciate something out of this day. Death, my friends. Death and the possibility of death can actually make us appreciate today and live it fully. And those who start to learn to rise out of the trees and get this big picture and this God perspective, you might be able to give witness to what it says in 1 Corinthians 15, 55 through 57, when it says, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin. The power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, because he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ." My friends, I don't know what you're going to do tonight if you're watching this on Sunday, October 31st. But remember, you're not promised tomorrow. Rise above your circumstances. Get the big picture and appreciate what God gives you right now. Okay, that's it. We'll see you next week, I hope. God bless you.